Very good, finally. Hello and welcome. This is SIG API Machinery for Kubernetes Open Source. Today is October 2nd. We are in Q4 officially of 2024. I don't know what happened this year, but it went faster than the previous one. Today we have a couple of topics in the agenda. Thank you, David, for bringing this up. And I think we can get into it. So you have the stage.
Sure. So for those that aren't aware, we discovered a significant problem with Delta FIFO, which is probably a thing you may not even have heard of, but it powers the informers that we use for our controllers. And so you have sort of like a chaining where you have a list watch, and then a reflector is a way to do the list watch and manage it. And then the reflector plus something called a Delta FIFO to separate the consumption from a watch from the processing of a watch is used to power something in the client called a cache.controller, which then consumes out of the Delta FIFO to provide a lister. Well, it actually provides an indexer, and then the lister is built on top of that is consistent when you call when you dequeue inside of the actual final controller that you build. And what we discovered is that it is possible to observe states when you make a list call to the lister that never existed in etcd. And so the example that I produced in a unit test is one where there's a field on a particular resource. Imagine it is an IP for, say, a pod. And pods should never have the same IP, but you can end up with pod X and pod Y and have a scenario where you have a valid sequence of create, update, and then create, update, delete, where pod X and pod Y never have the same IP at the same time. But when you do a list from the lister, from and this would be similar to the controller that you build on top of all this, you can end up observing two pods with the same IP. And this is how we found it. Because we have a test to be sure you never have two pods with the same IP, and the test failed. And digging into it and tracking backwards, we eventually discovered this behavior. Does that explanation make sense to people? And does anyone want to try to argue that that's reasonable behavior before we try to talk about what we might be able to do to mitigate and the costs for doing that? All right. If someone thinks of something later on, just raise your hand or interrupt, and we'll talk through it. So what maybe I can describe what I thought Delta FIFO did, which I realize now would still break things, and the other repercussions that come out of this. No, I should start in a different spot. I should start with what Delta FIFO does. So Delta FIFO, and actually the one that we call FIFO, isn't actually first in, first out. What happens is that even the regular FIFO keeps an in-order list of the keys, the etcd key name, roughly. So namespace name of the resource that has been modified from the first time it observed it. So that if you do an update to pod X and an update to pod Y, and then another update to pod X, and then you later dequeue, you will actually, as you dequeue from something called a FIFO, you will actually get those out of order. You will get the create for X and the update for X, and then you will get the create for Y. And that's because we keep track of the items for every key and deliver them when the key is dequeued, not when the item needs to get dequeued. But and so then what is the difference with a Delta FIFO? A Delta FIFO tries to collapse the delete. So it tries, and I haven't reviewed the code to actually see if it successfully does this, but it deduplicates a delete. So if you get two deletes, it'll dedupe them. I think it also tries to say if you have not observed a create and you get a delete, you do not see the item at all. And this is somewhat useful, but I don't think it comes up very often. So what would be the consequences if we tried to write a new, like the real FIFO that actually delivers in order? Um, I don't think we would see that many new watch notifications. So right now it is still the case based on my view of the code, and I would love it if someone else has also looked at the code and can comment. But my view of the code says that I think a controller gets notified for every single update to a particular object. And so it will see an NQ for every individual update, and therefore by delivering an order, we will not see that many additional controller NQs. Has anyone else looked at the code to be convinced of this?
I also took some time to look through the code and see if there was like gonna like at least if I could eyeball any like major performance implications. I couldn't find anything. I was specifically looking for anything that indicated that we, took a series of updates and collapsed them into maybe a single update or anything like that. And I couldn't find that.
Okay. So here's the solution that I think I would like to see. It's not quite the same as me volunteering and saying I'm going to write it right now. I don't know. I might. Um, but if someone else felt super motivated, I would love to see them do it. What I'm thinking about doing is creating a feature gate to say use in order watch event delivery or something like that. Create this feature gate, provide a new FIFO implementation that uses it, and then make the default cache controller implementation use this in order FIFO when the feature gate is true. And then we can discuss whether the feature gate defaults to true or defaults to false. I think I would try to make it default to true, so that we fix the bug. We don't think it will have negative implications, but if it does, there is a way to disable it in Cube and in any client consumer as well. Thoughts?
So David, that would end up being like process wide though, right? So you would be
It would
all in.
be. It would be process wide.
Normally, I think for most things that's not a issue. I'm just wondering if it's an issue for KCM since it's logically like a bunch of tiny processes that work together. Maybe if there's a bug, you would say, I want none of them to do that way, I guess.
I think that if there's a bug, we would want none of them to do that. Yeah, I mean, I'm hard pressed to imagine like we show that there's a bug in this new implementation, and we say to ourselves, well, I want garbage collection to use this, but not namespace deletion. It doesn't seem super likely.
Okay. Um, so I haven't spent time reading the code enough. I think the part in my head that hasn't fully connected is exactly which aspect of processing every watch. I think what you're saying is if we basically do the very naive thing of always processing all events as they're delivered, just sort of as is without any form of optimization, the bug goes away. I don't think I've connected the dots in my head enough to fully articulate why the bug goes away.
So I think the bug goes away because once we process these events in order, the cache controller sitting on top, the thing that is processing these events, logically has a resource version, and right now it doesn't logically have a resource version. And the reason I claim that is because if you process these events out of order, these watch events out of order, there's no resource version you could ask the QAPI server for that would show you that view of the data. And
Okay.
after we make this change, it would be possible for the cache controller to say, what's the last resource version that I've seen? If you ask the QAPI server for a list at this level, it will match the data in my cache.
Okay, so I think I followed that. I guess in my head, I'm trying to understand how we thought doing anything else would ever be correct.
It is hard to go back into the mind of 10 years ago. I think it was Daniel. It was not actually David. I think it was Daniel and Brendan. Um, I bet it was a case of this seems reasonable at the time.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just the way you explained it, it's like obviously I would want my RV to actually be a real RV that I could ask the API server about and get something reasonable back, right? Like it should be linked and have the same semantic meaning. But what I'm getting from you right now is because of this out of order processing, the RV that we believe our cache indexer to be at and its actual meaning to the API server has like no bearing at all. They're just probably close, but not good enough for like actual correctness.
Yeah,
That
Mo.
is what oh, go ahead, Joe.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I was also trying to understand like what might be the rationale for building it that way, and the only thing I could figure would be that if you assumed, which I don't assume, but if you did, if you assumed that a controller only cares about individual resource ordering, like the create happens before the update happens before the delete for a particular resource, then there's still some guarantees there about that. It's just there's no guarantees cross resource. And so you can't tie the state to a resource version anymore. It's like, well, we're going to collapse everything that we see about this resource into the next update you see about it. And then when we show you the next resource, it might be not as far progressed as the stuff we just showed you in the last update. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I can
I could
kind
see
of see an
past.
optimization like that. Sorry.
I could see past us trying that. I can also see for a Delta FIFO in particular, the dream being I'm going to issue a single update for these 6 updates. I'm not going to make you step through eat all 6. And actually, if the code had done that, it would be a lot riskier to make this change because you could be dramatically increasing the amount of processing in a controller. For whatever reason, it appears we never did that. And I cannot remember why that's the case either.
Yeah.
So that's the part that surprises me. I thought we did do that.
That's the way it was described to me too.
I can't find that in the code.
Me neither.
Okay. That's fine, I guess. Okay.
But I'm with David. If that was the case, then this would be a much riskier change. So we should all make sure we're good with that part, because if we do unknowingly increase the number of updates that happen to controllers in, like a large factor, right? Like I think if you increased it like by 2%, nobody would even notice. I think you probably even get less than that on this change. But if we did miss something and all of a sudden doubles the number of events controllers have to process, that would be something to consider.
So that raises a question in my mind. Do the existing work queue metrics, could I look at them from like a process that predates this change that we're proposing and then like afterwards and like I compare that data and get a sense for what I'm losing?
I think I would rather write a unit test that demonstrates that we don't collapse the create and updates or the various updates in sequence. I think that would be longer lasting and would make it so that future us would know exactly what this does.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that's fine. I think my rationale for like the metrics was just to understand like in like real world usage of controllers, like when we roll this out, what hit did we actually take? Like I'm guessing the sense from you guys is that it's going to be very small because we just don't do that much optimization. If we think
so yeah, what the code reads to me, and I will update a unit test to demonstrate this, is that we we dedupe deletes and nothing else. And that's what the code says. Like the code says we only dedupe deletes for now. Like there's a comment that says it. The code also appears to do the same thing.
Okay.
And there is a metric for ads, by the way. I don't believe our CI jobs collect it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, based on this conversation, I don't think I have concerns about the approach that you discussed. It.
All right. I will probably know in the next week or so whether I'm going to be able to do this in 132. Does anyone have like a dying urge to do this? All right. Does anyone have a dying urge to review a PR that does this?
I'll sign up for review.
I'll sign up. I don't want to, but I'll sign up.
Okay. Then I'll figure out whether I get it at 132 or 133, hopefully by next week.
Appreciate
and
it.
my
Thanks for
preference is
finding
to
this.
not backport this, just so we're level set on that as well.
Yeah.
I do not want to backport it. I want to put this behind a gate. I probably want that gate to default on, but I don't have appetite to backport. I think it's too big.
Yeah, I support that.
I guess so I think I agree with that. Do we believe, like ignoring the size and the complexity, right? Do we believe that the bugs caused by this misbehavior, small, rare, or just otherwise not necessarily super impactful for most scenarios, and therefore we shouldn't backport? Like,
they're rare. So I think in our measurement, it was something like 1 in 50,000 runs. And 1 in 50,000 runs that we caught.
And
So,
this scope of impact is also limited to controllers that care about the state of multiple resources at the same time.
yeah, Joe, when you say multiple resources, right, you mean multiple instances of the same resource type. Right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So if you have a controller that's just looking at one resource individually and doesn't care how other resources in that type will relate to it, that's not a problem.
I can understand a vendor making a choice when they get really comfortable with it to try to bring it into a release they want to support for a long time in a queue, maybe, if there's a desire for it. But the community risk on it does seem decently high. Like you think about like, my Z stream is working pretty well, and then I bring this in, and now my release from 9 months ago is not working so well. That'd be pretty painful.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay.
All right. I think that's all I have for that topic, Fede. Are we good to talk about server-side apply?
Yes, I was thinking on that since we have Joe and you here.
Yeah. You up for it, Joe?
Yeah, let's chat about it.
So server-side apply it had the promise to be really useful. We've used it in a couple spots, and when designing from scratch, I think it works quite nicely. When not designing from scratch, I've had some friction with it. So So let's see, how would I describe that? Like there's some of it that I know you fixed, right? So you added fake clients, right? Very
Mhm. Yeah, that was last release.
But there are other issues around, well, for instance, sets, right? It's very difficult to remove an item from a list type set.
Yes, very hard.
I should actually write that down. It's the first one that occurred to me right now, and I didn't write it down here. List type set is very difficult to remove from. And so I don't know for sure what to do there.
This,
Maybe we should try to enumerate first what we see the problems as.
yeah, I think that is like pretty key to making progress, is trying to quantify where the biggest issues are so that we can kind of work from a priority list.
All right.
I think that one is kind of a good example of the general problem of removing things with SSA can be pretty hard.
Yeah.
Just in general, right? Like I want that thing not to be set. Like, how do I express that?
So another one is when you're using a list type map and you have different fields managed by different field managers, deleting the entire, I guess, removing the entire list entry is kind of hard.
Yeah.
Don't know what to do about that one either. I'm actually not familiar with this one. List type atomic versus list type map. Are you familiar with this one, Joe?
I'm not sure I looked at that issue.
I believe I put that one here, and the topic that you just discussed about the list type set and the list type is literally what was it? What?
Oh, I created this. Let's open that one up on my screen too.
Are we lucky enough that Emily is here? We are not. Could you summarize the thread for us, Mache?
Honestly, I don't remember. Last time I was more prepared than today for this particular one. Sorry, I wouldn't even try, but I believe it shortly goes to what you were discussing, that there's a problem between how you handle list type set and list type map with regard to maybe not necessarily as specific as removing, but in general, dealing with server-side apply and various list types.
Okay. I don't know if anybody's aware. One that we ran into the other day being like a couple months ago, was container environment variables are tagged as being a list type equals map, but the order matters and keys can be repeated. So it's not a map at all. It's literally just a list. And it doesn't really merge well, because when you tell it to merge with list type map, it doesn't respect ordering and it doesn't like duplicate keys. So that's one example where, like, some people want it logically to behave like a map because they want server-side apply merging, right? Like, you could have two different field managers both as an environment variable, and that should be supported. So we need the merge mechanics that only the map list type map supports, but we don't actually want any of the other properties. So we don't even have a concept in server-side apply that fits that field, and because it's in pod and pod template, it's kind of all over the built-in types.
Oh, that'll make a change. Lovely.
Yeah. So that's one of the worst ones that I've been aware of, and at least in the built-in types, like in terms of like integrating this fully into the system.
Let's see. Another one that I hit. Oh, good. You have the thread up there, Fetty. That's lots and lots of words. None of us know how to summarize this one. Where's ChatGPT?
Yeah, throw a bot at it.
And let me know if you want me to go to any part of the thread.
I'm gonna see if I can try to find a way to skim it.
Do you want me to throw it into an LLM and see what comes out?
That'd be awesome. Could you do that?
I mean, put the pressure on me. Keep talking and I will try.
All right, I'm going to go to one other item then that I have found. So we have those extract methods that we added. Do you remember, gosh, many years back, Joe? I told
Yeah, I
you,
remember that.
I think a common workflow is going to be extract what was set before. And I found this really useful when trying to decide things like, do I have an apply that I want to apply, right? And and so I guess one thing about this, it would be good for these for us to commit to these methods not going away because they are useful. The issue that I had was with serialization, and I should make a test to demonstrate this, I think. But when you end up submitting an apply for an atomic struct where there's a default value that gets set for, say, empty string. When you do the extract back in, it doesn't read back the way that you expect. And
the defaulting gets in the way.
And it's difficult because like you have to figure out how do you truly diff this. The way that I ultimately did it was serializing the apply configuration out and then reading that in as the actual type. Obviously, that's expensive. So I guess here I can owe a test. I guess I should write my name.
Okay.
What this actually looks like.
Yeah, I can imagine that though.
Yeah, and maybe also combine it with mutating admission policy,
right?
Which
Same kind of
does
thing.
Awesome things.
Yeah, defaulting and admission are kind of the same in the sense that like what you sent isn't what got written.
Yeah. So that is.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to chew on that one for a little bit. That one's gonna be tricky. I think the field removal, we have some docs on, and I could start recirculating some ideas there. We would have to do real development work, I think, to get removals working nicely. But there's been, yeah, it's just right now you express server-side apply is literally just allowing you to express a subset of the resource that you have values for. So the idea of like, I don't want this value to be set isn't really a concept that was built into the original idea, which creates these problems, right? Like you can't say like, I want this. I just want to clear this label. Like, I just don't want it. Like, we decided we don't need it anymore. We've gone through our migration. We don't need it. I just want to remove it. There's really no way to do that.
That summary is so long and yet still does not tell me what it's about.
What do you want me to ask?
I don't even know.
Yeah, you better read the entire thread than the summary.
Yeah, I think we'll have to.
I did a quick read through the thread, and the biggest one that Emily is pointed out is that for some, and she's specifically talking about taints, there are multiple controllers, so you have different actors acting on this particular list, and that particular list is of set type, which basically means you either have to, as a controller, keep the entire order to be able to modify the taints, or you have to change the type of the list to be a map, in which case each controller is able to then only manage their own set of keys that that it wants
Mm-hmm.
to manage. So that's where it boils down to, you either have to do extra work to ensure that you are working nicely with others, or you actually are forced to change the type of the list to support co-sharing,
I see.
which
So
I
it is
believe,
probably an atomic right now, and Emily
yes,
wishes that it was a map so that different controllers would be able to manage different taints.
yeah. I believe that that kind of a question might be not only limited to taints specifically, but potentially there might be other places that will be affected in a similar fashion, where either a change to a map-based type will be required, or on the other hand, you're left with the extra work to make sure that you are maintaining the order of different pieces of that particular list to be able to adjust
So,
it.
okay. In that thread, Mache, did anyone note the fact that you are allowed to list a single taint multiple times? And
Uh,
that is
no. I
aha.
believe the entire thread basically boiled down to, is it possible for us to change the taints from atomic to be a map? And that's where it focused primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I recall, taints can be repeated with different effects.
Interesting.
That's true if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And Mache, did I understand correctly that there's something about ordering in there, that the list did have like an order that matters?
I'm not sure if
Okay.
specifically about ordering, but more about there are other entries in the list that are managed by different actors. I'm
Got
not
it.
100% sure about ordering,
Okay.
uh, possibly, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, I had added pretty late in the cycle for server-side apply. I'd gone in and added code so that if you changed what type something was, if you switched it from list type list to list type map, that server-side apply could handle that change. It could understand that, oh, I'm seeing something that wasn't a list type map before and now it is, so I will migrate the managed field data over before doing the apply. So that code is in place and tested. So you can change your mind on these things, but there is a cost to users, right? All of a sudden, like their managed fields start acting differently. But the server can support it.
All right, so the next thing for us to do is probably try to order the items in this list.
Yeah, that's what I'm really interested in here.
Uh,
Has anybody else run into this? Have any thoughts on like where you've seen the biggest problems in server-side apply?
I ran into one this week with list type atomic, and I think the issue was that in the generated apply configuration types, I believe we generate slice fields as just a slice with a mid empty tag. So the question was, how would you express in an apply configuration the intent to include the list field in your apply configuration, but have it be explicitly empty and not omitted from the intent?
so it's
Yeah.
specifically that you want an empty list.
And it is atomic, so there doesn't seem to be a way using generated types to express that intent. Because if it's empty, which is what you want the state to be, then it's omitted from the serialization and equivalent to, ignoring it on the client side.
Right.
Right.
That might
So-
be fixable. Okay, that's a really good one to list, though. I'd
Yeah.
never seen that one before.
Might be fixable by making it a pointer to a slice, right?
Slices are nillable, so you can actually check if it's nil or not.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I think I can do this one, so I can move it up near the top. This is the owing the test, and it would be fairly easy for us to commit that the methods don't go away. Well, we no longer need to do the address one. We'll keep that in the list. We'll put it at the bottom. So, I would say,
We've
these
seen a
are
couple
all
of big
problems.
categories. They're
Huh?
all problems. Yeah, they're all problems. I'm just trying to see. There's one group is like stuff around removal and omit empty. There's another group around the handling of atomic versus map.
Okay. So, removal of items. And so this one is removal. This one is removal.
Yeah.
This one is not removal, but is it? Would you put it in the same thing?
Yeah, we can put it in there. I think handling omit empty is kind of that group of like, how do you express things not being there or being empty? I'm conflating a little bit.
All right.
Okay.
Well, here's where our problem is. We hit this during mutating admission policy too, and we punted. Right?
Yes. Yeah, we punted on this. I have some notes and thoughts on how to tackle this. Let me bring this back up in the next couple of weeks with some thoughts, and
Yeah.
we'll keep. I want to keep pushing this along, so let's keep talking about it. But I'll circle back and look at that one specifically.
It might be the case.
That one's going to be hard. Yeah.
Well, one option that we have is if there actually is a good way to express it in a JSON patch, we could say that the solution to this is just JSON patch.
It's true. Yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing for mutated admission policy is like the stuff that you can't do with server-side apply, you do with JSON patch.
Actually, related to that, Joe, I learned something about JSON patch when reviewing your PR.
Okay.
And what I learned is that JSON patch has something called like a test directive.
Mm-hmm.
Do we support that test directive for patches submitted to the Kube API server?
We do, because that library that I was using to test it, all our code funnels into. So it'll just work anywhere in Kubernetes. We only have the one library and we don't do anything to intercept it. But I actually haven't gone and looked at our actual usage. I looked to see that admission webhooks, which always have to send back a JSON patch, use that. And I didn't go look to see if our normal patch operation does anything special with it, but I'm assuming it doesn't.
So here's the thought. What if there was a way to express, I want to be able to use a test in my JSON patch, and if this test fails, I want my patch to fail. And the way that you would use this would be, I want to delete this item from a list map. I am going to test to be sure that the item at index 6 has key Bob. And if it does have key Bob, I want to issue a remove. And if it does not have key Bob, I want a conflict error. And what that would let me do is build a patch that when it was possible to deconflict, would delete the correct item. And when it wasn't, wouldn't delete it.
We should try it. I think it might just work. I don't know exactly what error messages we always send back when the tests fail.
Yeah.
I noticed that because I had to write some code when I was doing a mutated admission to catch the right error and do something I thought was appropriate there. And I didn't go look to see what we'd done in patch or webhooks for that error.
Okay. Well, it's an idea.
Yeah, I like that idea, and we should try it. It might just work.
Yeah. But yeah, I think even something like that, being able to add that kind of guidance, even if the answer is not use server-side apply directly, but here is a way to accomplish this goal,
Right.
would significantly help us.
Yeah, I think that would really help people out. At least you're not totally blocked. There's something you can do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's all I've got for the topic, Fede. And if Emily does want to come here and discuss, or Macha, if you want to bring it up again next week or something,
I
wouldn't
can let
mind
her
filling in
know.
this section.
I can invite her to, I will upload the video. How about this? Upload the video, ping on that thread, Emily, we discuss your issue in the meeting, take a look. If you want to discuss further with us, come to the next meeting. We will be happy to.
Yeah, really appreciate the feedback on server-side apply. This is really useful.
Yes. Great.
And Lewis, to your question, based on the things here, I'm not sure that set, which would be the other natural choice, would be better. Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, I'm trying to grok the last thing we were discussing, David, about testing in batches. And this week I was thinking a lot about resource version set in an apply configuration, which right, if you're producing your apply configuration from lister state or observed state, you sort of need to include resource version to avoid stomping changes that come in between your read and your apply being written. And I'm curious if there's if any blanket guidance can be made about when that's appropriate, because it feels like a shame to have to basically end up doing an optimistic write, like an update using apply. But it also seems like there are definitely cases where you end up stomping someone else if you don't set resource version on your apply configuration.
I'm not entirely clear on why an apply configuration that, I guess because you only want to manage certain fields. But if you have to have a resource version specified, do you really want resource version, or do you wish there was a way to express a precondition that says this annotation is still set?
I think the case is where, say, part of the object is managed by another controller or another field manager. You read that, you probably have an informer with a cache that you're reading it from. And based on that state that you aren't writing, you are producing your apply configuration for some other subset of the object. And your apply configuration is only correct if the state you're reading is up to date.
That's not true. Based on what you said, that's not true. Your apply configuration is only correct if the field that you looked at still has the same value. So, for instance, if you were dependent on field foo and someone else set field bar and you were trying to set field awesome, it wouldn't matter if field bar got changed. It only matters if field foo got changed.
That's right. So I guess I'm getting at is this problem the same problem that you're trying to address when you brought up the tests in JSON Patch?
No. I don't.
There are, server-side apply does have a couple tools for this. So for example, if you care about a state of a field, you can include it in your server-side apply configuration, even if you know that field's already written to that value. And then if you don't own that field, or that field is different than what you expect, that will cause your apply to fail. So if you want to assert that some annotation is set, if you're setting something else, or some spec field is set if you're setting the status field, you could assert that by saying that you want that field to be that way. And if you don't do a force, then you will fail if it's not set.
Right. So you would have to share ownership.
But you're saying I care about the value of that field, which I think was the intent of the design.
Okay, that makes sense. In this context, it was related to Lewis's topic about image poll secrets, which is an atomic list that actually is written by multiple. That is written to by multiple controllers.
Yeah, an atomic list written by multiple controllers is problematic on its own. Yeah, and that's going to mess this up.
But given that you can't remove things if you have type set, it's not naturally better to say, let's make it a set. So
yeah, no, I agree. I think we have this is. I think this gets back to a couple of the other ones we have, where it's like people don't really want it to behave atomically, but they didn't have any other choice. So we've just got a feature gap, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Thanks.
Just a quick comment about this last conversation, Ben. Are you saying that you're worried about having to set resource version to sort of enforce like the generic semantic of I made a decision based on what I saw, but I can't express to the API server which pieces I cared about. But if I just set RV in my patch, that's guaranteed to conflict if anything changes. And thus, I'm safe.
Basically, yes. In particular, there's a controller that is ensuring that image poll secrets on a service account contains a particular reference, but it doesn't care if there may already be references in there. And the only way, if you're already doing an apply to manage other fields, the only way to include in that apply your addition to image poll secrets is to force conflicts and take ownership of it because it's atomic. But if you don't want to stomp what may already be there, then you need some way to make sure that that does conflict if you would be stomping. So like the answer may well be like, okay, it's tough that this field happens to be atomic.
Yeah, we have some big atomic fields. For example, the CRD, the entire schema is atomic. So shared updates to it are not really well supported by SSA yet. I can imagine people are going to want to write things that have, just go in and make targeted changes to that. So I do think we have a gap there. And unfortunately, I think it kind of boils down to, well, the idea of atomic was that it was single ownership or everybody has to agree on the exact state of this thing. I don't really think that's what people are trying to do. In most of these cases, they're like, I want to own these these elements out of this list, and somebody else wants to own these elements out of the list.
Okay, so looks like we are done.
Yeah, keep sending feedback my way if anybody runs into anything. And I'm gonna be looking into this, and I'll circle back. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, David. And thank you, everybody, for the discussions today. I will upload this later and share with all of you. Good to see you, and we'll see you hopefully in a couple of weeks. Have a good rest of the week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.